What if Eazy-E didn't really contract AIDS from any of his partners? What if the rumors about him being injected by someone with a motive were actually true? Because that's what some people believe.
And they're saying that the conspiracy says that Suge Knight could have potentially been the person that gave Eazy-E AIDS.
And Ice Cube? It looks like he's finally breaking his silence about the man he once clashed with, and the painful truth behind what really happened. Ice Cube once burned every bridge with a diss track so ruthless, it made hip-hop history, no Vaseline. But years later, when Eazy-E was dying in a hospital bed, it wasn't animosity that remained, it was silence and regret. No cameras, no crews, just two broken friends trying to speak before time ran out. This isn't just about a rap group falling apart. It's about how sometimes reconciliation comes too late and how Ice Cube's friend might have died the wrong way, with more questions than answers and no real goodbye. Long before the headlines, diss tracks, and platinum plaques, there was something more powerful holding NWA together: brotherhood. Before Ice Cube became the voice of social rage, and before Eazy-E earned his title as the godfather of gangsta rap, they were just two young men navigating the chaos of Compton. It wasn't Hollywood. It wasn't music videos. It was the raw, unfiltered grind of real life. Ice Cube met Eazy-E in the early 80s. And Cube, still a hungry lyricist with street dreams, immediately noticed something different about Eazy. He wasn't just flexing, he was already living the hustler lifestyle. Cube remembered the moment vividly. Fila sweatsuit, custom-painted Jeep. He looked like a boss. While Cube was still scribbling rhymes in notebooks, Eazy had the kind of presence that turned heads. He had street money, street credibility, and a street-level ambition that few could match. But at the time, Eazy didn't even want to rap. His plan was to manage a group called HBO Homeboys Only. He reached out to Cube for his pen, not his presence. "I like what you write," Eazy told him. "Write something for my group." That something turned out to be one of the most legendary songs in hip-hop history, Boys in the Hood. And here's where fate got interesting. HBO rejected the song. They said it was too gritty, too real, too Compton. But Dr. Drill Ready, a production genius on the rise, saw the potential. He convinced Eazy to record it himself. Problem was, Eazy had never rapped before. Not seriously, not professionally. But he stepped into the booth, and something clicked. His voice was nasal, his delivery was clumsy at first. But what he lacked in polish, he made up for in presence. You believed Eazy because he lived what he rapped. He wasn't performing a character, he was the character. And behind the boards, Dre worked magic. With Cube writing the bars, Eazy began transforming from street hustler to West Coast icon. He got better every time he stepped to the mic, Cube later recalled. He worked hard, until eventually he could hold his own. By the time I left NWA, he was a real rapper. He could flow, he could hold a stage. Eazy's breakthrough was symbolic for West Coast hip-hop. Before him, New York was the nucleus of the culture. But with NWA and Eazy leading the charge, that shifted. They didn't just rap about parties or punchlines, they rapped about police brutality and the pain of growing up black in America. And the world paid attention. The chemistry between Cube, Dre, and Eazy wasn't manufactured, it was explosive. Eazy brought the streets, Dre brought the sound, Cube brought the message. Together, they birthed a new era of rap. Built not in boardrooms, but in bedrooms, backyards, and basements. But like most powerful unions in music, fame didn't just amplify their voices, it also amplified their tensions. And that brotherhood, it wouldn't survive the business. By 1989, NWA wasn't just making waves, they were causing tremors across the music industry. Straight Outta Compton had detonated into the mainstream, redefining what rap could sound like and what it could talk about. And at the core of that lyrical revolution, Ice Cube. He didn't just spit bars, he architected most of them. Tracks like F the Police and Express Yourself carried Cube's pen, and his fingerprints were all over Eazy-E's solo debut, Eazy Does It. But while the group was cashing in, Ice Cube noticed something off. The royalty checks? Suspiciously low. The contracts? Vague. And when he asked for clarity, he was met with dodges and deflections. Cube wasn't just a rapper, he was a thinker. He did the math, and it wasn't adding up. At the center of the tension was Jerry Heller, the group's manager. while the others seemed content or at least too distracted by the fame to question anything. Cube saw what he believed to be exploitation. Heller, according to Cube, was funneling the money and favoring Eazy, who was co-owner of Ruthless Records. And that, in Cube's eyes, created a power imbalance that no group could survive. Cube later told Thrasher magazine, "It was either stay and know you getting f***ed out some money, or leave and try to start a career from there. It wasn't an easy decision." He was walking away from the biggest group in the world at the height of their fame, but he chose self-respect over superstardom. When Cube left, he didn't just leave a group, left a brotherhood. Dr. Dre, MC Ren, and DJ Yella didn't take it lightly. Instead of private calls or reconciliations, they responded with bars. On 1990's EP 100 Miles and Runnin', they took veiled shots at Cube, hinting at betrayal, but things escalated quickly. On their 1991 follow-up album Nas for Life, NWA included a brutal interlude titled A Message to B.A., short for Benedict Arnold. The skit was a barrage of voicemails, angry, vicious, and graphically violent. One caller claimed Cube ran from a fight, another mocked his loyalty to New York rap, and one even threatened him with sexual assault. "When we see yo, we gon' cut your hair off and you with a broomstick." It wasn't just a diss, it was war. Public, personal, unapologetic. And for Cube, the line had been crossed. He didn't run, he retaliated. And he came back harder than anyone expected with one of the most lethal diss tracks in hip-hop history. In 1991, Ice Cube dropped No Vaseline, and nothing in hip-hop would ever be the same. This wasn't just a diss track, it was an all-out lyrical execution. The beat hit hard, but the words hit harder. Every bar was aimed at his former crew, and Cube didn't hold back. He wasn't just settling Scotia, was flipping the entire NWA narrative on its head. The most iconic line? "You're getting f***ed out your green by a white boy with no Vaseline." A direct shot at Jerry Heller, the group's manager, who Cube believed was exploiting the others for financial gain. But Heller wasn't the only target. Cube ripped into Dr. Dre, called out MC Ren and DJ Yella for staying silent, and saved his most venomous verses for Eazy-E. What made No Vaseline so vicious wasn't just the language, it was the facts. Cube laid out the royalty disputes, the shady contracts, the loyalty betrayals, and how his so-called brothers had let a manager divide them. He turned private frustrations into public ammunition, and fans, they were stunned. The diss sent shockwaves through the music industry. Even veteran artists had to pause. Ice Cube had just delivered what many considered the most devastating diss track of all time, without needing a single guest feature. It was raw, it was detailed, and it was personal. To make matters even more impactful, Cube dropped the track on his second solo album, Death Certificate, a project already layered in social commentary and black empowerment. The diss wasn't petty, it was strategic. It was a statement that Cube had left NWA, but he hadn't lost his voice. In fact, it had only gotten louder. Critics couldn't ignore it. The Source magazine named it one of the top diss tracks in hip-hop history. Fans debated it endlessly. Was it too harsh? Or was it exactly what was needed to call out exploitation and blind loyalty? And what did NWA do in response? Nothing. They didn't record a rebuttal. They didn't respond publicly. It was radio silence. Because deep down, some believe even they knew Cube had won. And just when you thought it couldn't get more personal, it did. Years passed. The dust settled. Time moved on. But in early 1995, everything changed. Eazy-E, the man who once stood at the center of West Coast rap, fell seriously ill. What began as a persistent, violent cough quickly turned critical. He was admitted to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. Within weeks, he was diagnosed with AIDS-induced pneumonia. The announcement came just 10 days before his sending shockwaves through the hip-hop community. But behind the headlines, behind the press conferences and fan speculation, there was something more important, something deeply human. A quiet moment, a conversation, a reunion. Ice Cube and Eazy spoke. According to Cube, the beef had already cooled by then. The anger that once fueled No Vaseline had faded. Time had done its work. And now, the only thing left between them was unfinished business and a faint hope of doing something great again. We had talked about getting back together, Cube told The Hollywood Reporter. Our feud had down, and he and Dre were still at odds. I said, if you can get Dre to do it, I'm ready. It wasn't about records. It wasn't about reviving NWA for nostalgia or money. It was about redemption, about reclaiming something that fame and ego had fractured. Dr. Dre echoed the sentiment. In interviews, he's admitted that despite the fights, despite the fallout, he and Eazy had a bond that never really broke. We would probably still be working together, Dre said. We'd argue like we always did, but we'd get the work done. We'd do something amazing. That hope, the possibility of reuniting NWA was real, and it came heartbreakingly close to happening. But fate had other plans. On March 26, 1995, Eazy-E died. He was just 31 years old. His death marked not just the loss of a pioneer, but the final chapter of a brotherhood torn apart by business and brought back together by mortality. For Cube, the moment was heavy, bittersweet. It was a reminder that life doesn't wait for grudges to heal, and sometimes peace comes only when the music stops. But in that final exchange, those few words between two former friends, there was something rare in hip-hop: closure. In 2015, when Straight Outta Compton hit theaters, fans saw a dramatic reenactment of NWA's explosive journey from rebellious beginnings to heartbreaking losses. But for Ice Cube, the film wasn't just a trip down memory lane. It was a deeply personal confrontation with ghosts he thought he buried. The movie, produced by Cube himself, starred his real-life son, O'Shea Jackson Jr., as a younger version of him. That casting choice alone added layers of emotion. Imagine watching your child relive the most defining and painful chapters of your youth: the fights, the fallout, the betrayal, and most gut-wrenching of all, the goodbye. It was rough a couple of scenes, Cube admitted in an interview, especially the hospital scene. That moment, where Eazy-E lies dying, surrounded by silence and remorse, wasn't just a cinematic beat. It was Cube's chance to re-experience one of the hardest moments of his life. He wasn't acting, he was remembering, and when the cameras rolled, he couldn't hold back the tears. The weight of that hospital scene hit harder than anyone expected, not just because of the powerful script, but because everyone involved knew it was rooted in real pain. That room, that moment, was a tribute to something real. Two friends who once ruled the world, torn apart by money and management, finally reconnected only to be separated again by death. Watching Eazy-E's death play out on screen brought everything back. The cold hospital air, the regret, the things unsaid, the reconciliation that came too late. Cube has spoken about how tough that particular shoot was, how it broke him in ways he didn't anticipate. I dropped a few tears, he said, but it was more than that. It was closure on film. It was grief turned into art. And for fans, it wasn't just a goodbye to Eazy-E, it was a window into the emotional wreckage left behind. Because Straight Outta Compton wasn't just about music or fame. It was about how fragile brotherhood can be when tested by ego, money, and time. That wasn't acting. That was memory, captured forever on film. Now, here's where it gets even murkier and even more haunting. Eazy-E's death in March of 1995 has never truly sat right with everyone. He was 31. Healthy, energetic, and still active in the music business. So when news broke that a violent cough had landed him in the hospital, and that within just 10 days he was gone diagnosed with AIDS-induced pneumonia, the hip-hop world was left stunned. It wasn't just the speed of it all, it was the silence, the confusion, the questions that came flooding in almost immediately. How does a man go from a studio session to a deathbed in less than 2 weeks? Why were there no signs before? Why did none of his long-term sexual partners contract HIV? Why did no one else close to him fall ill? These weren't just wild conspiracy questions, they were coming from people who knew him personally, people who had seen him just weeks before. And then, years later, came a moment that poured gasoline on the speculation. Suge Knight, during a bizarre appearance on Jimmy Kimmel Live, made what many interpreted as a threat disguised as a joke. He said, while smiling, that you didn't need to shoot someone anymore, you could just inject them with something. They got stuff now, they get your and they can put cancer or AIDS in your he claimed. The room laughed, but those who understood the weight of those words, they froze. Fast forward to 2023, Ice Cube appears on Logan Paul's Impulsive podcast, and finally, someone asked the question outright: could Suge Knight have had something to do with Eazy's? Cube didn't dodge, he didn't deny, but he also didn't confirm. Instead, he dropped a chilling line: "I don't put past nobody." He added, "I think if somebody poked you with one of them needles, you'd know, and Eazy would have told somebody." But that statement, logical as it sounds, didn't stop the buzz. Because maybe Eazy didn't know. Maybe he didn't feel it. Maybe, in the chaos of fame and lawsuits and power struggles, something darker happened that no one could predict or prove. Family members, including Eazy's own daughter, E.B., have long questioned the official story. She's even worked on documentaries and interviews digging into the gaps in the timeline and the lack of transparency in his medical records. To this day, no solid proof has surfaced. No smoking, no confirmed foul play. But what Ice Cube gave us, what he admitted for the first time, was something fans had long suspected, that even he, someone who knew Eazy better than most, isn't sure of what really happened. And that, maybe, is the most unsettling part of all. Eazy-E wasn't just a rapper, he was a revolution in motion. The self-made mogul who co-founded Ruthless Records, the visionary who dared to say what others wouldn't, and the street entrepreneur who turned raw Compton stories into platinum records. He wasn't polished, but that's what made him real. He gave a voice to a world that mainstream America tried to ignore. By the time he passed in 1995, Eazy-E had already cemented his role as the godfather of gangsta rap. He was the catalyst behind NWA's success, the one who believed in the movement before the rest of the world caught on. His confidence was contagious. His ambition, relentless. Even through the diss tracks, the betrayals, and the business breakups, Ice Cube never erased Eazy from the story. Because deep down, Cube knew that without Eazy, none of it would have existed. He was the spark, the one who put the plan into motion. The one who said, "Let's do this," when everyone else was just dreaming. Years later, Ice Cube reflected on what could have been. "We would probably still be working together," he said. "Still arguing, still making magic." That quote hits differently now, not just because it shows Cube's willingness to reconcile, but because it shows what the world lost when Eazy died too soon. In 2016, NWA was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It was a long overdue moment of recognition, a cultural nod to the group that shifted the sound and soul of hip-hop forever. Ice Cube, Dr. Dre, MC Ren, and DJ Yella stood on that stage. But one voice was missing. One shadow loomed larger than all of them: Eazy-E. His sons and daughters have carried the torch. His music still blasts through speakers. His name still trends in lyrics. And his legacy still echoes in the attitude of artists who proudly walk the line between rebellion and truth. But no one could replace his presence. Ice Cube didn't rewrite the past. He didn't sugarcoat it. Instead, he honored it. Every stage appearance, every interview, every tribute. It wasn't for show, it was for a brother who helped build an empire. Because in the end, Eazy's legacy wasn't just built on music, it was built on movement. And Cube made sure the world never forgot that. Ice Cube gave us no Vaseline. He gave us fire, fury, truth. But what he rarely gave was closure. Until now. From savage diss tracks to silent hospital visits, from public takedowns to private reconciliations, this was never just a rap feud. It was brotherhood, torn apart, then healed in whispers. So what do you think? Did Cube do the right thing in the end? Or was the damage too deep to ever fully repair? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Because if this is what Cube revealed, imagine the stories he'll never tell. And remember, in hip-hop, grudges might go platinum, but forgiveness? That's the real legacy.